This is something that I started writing about a year ago, and I worked on it a little bit recently, but most of it was about a year ago that I wrote it. I guess I'd like to call it a short story, but I've chopped up a bunch of parts of it so it's not so long, but it's so random that I think it'll make just as much sense with the parts I've taken out, the story-wise. Squeeze. Jorge had been impressed by Alfred's keen sense of direction and strange compulsion towards the unworldly. Alfred and Jorge were certainly two peas in a barrel. They both loved to speak of things any respectable person might walk in on and say, "That's the most perverse thing I've ever laid my little ear on." After riling up the aficionados at the meat conference, Alfred and Jorge decided to retire to the open road. Amidst the chaos, the issue of horseback riding in Des Moines, Iowa came to the poker field, except there were no chips or cards here. "Iowa?" Jorge exclaimed. Alfred looked back to the road. "I don't know what to make of this gas gauge. It's been on empty for about an hour now." Jorge didn't seem to be paying any attention to Alfred. He proved this suspicion correct by shouting, "What the cocksucker needs is a good orange tree and a blender reading ice, slice, and sure as hell dice." Alfred looked at Jorge, who certainly now had the more crazed look of the two. "Which cocksucker are you referring to? I know of no such thing." Silence followed. The road to Iowa from D.C. was a long one, but Jorge and Alfred had turned his napkin into an odd adaptation of a pirate's bandana. It partially drooped over his eyes. "I am a victim of the modern age," he screamed with great ferocity. Jorge interpreted Alfred's helpless aggression as a misunderstood reaction to his temporary loss of vision from the bandana covering his eyes. Regardless of Jorge's queries, the waiters and managers of the joint were already very disturbed, even before this ridiculously savage outburst. But now they looked as if they had just been subjugated to a Chevy Chase movie. Jorge and Alfred's patience with each other was growing thinner by the minute. Alfred had run into problems with God before. Once he was in a church for his sister Maria's wedding, stoned out of his mind, and he totally flipped out. When the Reverend asked for everyone in attendance to say a prayer, Alfred began loudly ranting on and on about the apocalypse, the four horsemen, and Lionel Richie. He ran up on the altar and took the prayer book from the preacher. He had somehow tricked himself into believing that his boyhood dream had come true. He was in the Super Bowl, and at this moment, the Reverend was his wide receiver. He began to drop back and mumble, "Go along, man, for fuck's sake." When the stunned Reverend didn't move, Alfred took it upon snapped back into place like a rubber chinchilla. But it was too late. Alfred had spiked the prayer book and made a fool of himself. He blamed it on God, and he still does now. "Hey, Jorge, did I ever tell you about that time that rat bastard God of ours made me think I was Joe Namath at Maria's wedding?" Jorge was not listening. He was fairly straight and decided to pull out the map and find out where they were. In relation to Iowa, or in relation to anything for that matter, Jorge had no idea where they were. But he still attempted to at least gain a vague understanding of the location for future reference. "Maria's wedding, huh? No, never heard that. Hey, let me try." It was like no other. The vibrations emanating from it were perversely similar to what an earthworm feels when pondering his place in the world, along with the horror it endured while Ree's company was on prime time. As Alfred walked around the car, images of Suzanne Summers crept up on him like a trained clown in a coal miner's nightmare. "She's got a nice set of cans, goddamn," Alfred blurted out as he and Jorge took their seats. Jorge didn't know what to think of this strange exclamation. After all, he hadn't interpreted the vibrations from the gas station having anything to do with Ree's company. Traded and labeled peso-grubbing populace. There is no arguing this. Few people had the capacity for insanity that Alfred and Jorge took for granted every day. Cruising along the highway now at 60 miles an hour, Alfred looked over at Jorge, partly to make sure that he actually existed. "I'm bored, Jorge," Jorge blurted out unemotionally. "You're telling me that you're bored? Jorge, if I had 5 arms, I'd rest my chin on one of them in amazement."